Hello and welcome back to our final session of the day on the startup to IPO stage. I can't believe how quickly this afternoon has flown, which I think speaks to the incredibly interesting panels and speakers that we've heard from. In our final session, Building Impactful Engineering Teams, our panelists will share their insights on how to set up and scale a product-orientated engineering team and discuss what frameworks and tools can be used to optimize the team's happiness and productivity. Guiding the session will be Maureen Chiana, a consultant, trainer and speaker in neuroleadership and emotional intelligence and founder of the Mindsight Academy. Maureen is a behavioural change expert who's held senior leadership roles in the public and private sectors. In her work, Maureen uses the latest findings from neuroscience to help organisations become more human and their people improve the quality of their thinking to achieve sustainable success. Maureen, thank you so much for leading our final panel of the day, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Esme. Really great pleasure to be here this evening. So with me this evening discussing this topic of building impactful engineering teams, I have Douglas Gresham with us this evening. Welcome, Douglas. And we also have Claire Delaunay. Claire, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. So let's kick this off by introducing ourselves. So if I say, Douglas, let's start with you. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. My name's Douglas Gresham. I'm an engineering tribe lead at Skyscanner. I lead our search engine tribe, which is responsible for the construction of flights itineraries. We also look after geographic data about current travel restrictions in place, also machine learning as well. My background is I've been a software engineer for a number of years, let's say more than 10, and we'll hide the rest of it. Usually at large companies, at Google and Facebook predominantly, and I also do some consultation for startups as well.
Thank you very much. Claire, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. Good evening even. So my name is Claire Delaunay. I am a software engineer by training, but and started really my career in software engineering with I would say traditional software engineering, so cloud system and all of that. But I specialized very early on in robotics, and so I've been now doing any kind of robots, building any kind of robots for the last 20 years. I co-founded a couple of startups, one in particular named Auto, about self-driving trucks that I sold to Uber in 2016. I also worked in other robotics projects at SRI here in California, at Google, Uber, and most recently Nvidia, where I'm now a VP of engineering. And yeah, all my life, all my career, I've been about teams. I've been about working with teams and creating amazing technology. So super excited to be able to come and speak about my experience here.
Wow, thank you so much, Claire. So this is an international panel, actually. We've got Douglas in London and Claire in California. So this topic is one that really interests me so much and I'm so passionate about. So I'm so pleased to be with you, really smart, clever people. I'm hearing robotics and all that. So, let's kick this off by, starting. So Douglas, what makes an effective team? What makes a team impactful?
I think if I had to choose one thing, I would probably choose trust, and the foundation of trust is psychological safety. And I know that psychological safety can be a real buzzword, but what that means for me is a team where everyone is able to bring their ideas, their thoughts, their input, and be able to fail, be able to learn from experience, and be able to hold each other accountable for the results that they are delivering. Absent that, there are countless techniques and frameworks and processes one can use to try and cajole delivery and accountability out of people, but where you have trust, they will do it for themselves. So that, for me, is at the heart of all of it.
Wow, that is amazing, and I would totally agree with that, because once you really have people's trust, you get them. It's easy to be really influential, to persuade them. So I truly love that. Claire, so what do you feel? What makes a team impactful or effective?
Well, that's a very good question, and I would say it really depends on the teams. And of course, trust is very important, accountability and others are very important. But I think practically it's often hard to understand exactly what it means. And where is the frontier also between trust and accountability? And I think it really depends on the team and on the type of project. And I think the real magic in high-performing team is finding a way to get the right people at the table and contributing at the right moment, which basically means that understanding very well the dynamic, especially as a manager, but understanding the dynamic in the team, trying to understand and adjust the project and the communication spaces around the personality also of the team members goes a very long way. And the reason I mentioned that is because, especially at the beginning when I started engineering about 20 years ago, there was very little women in engineering. And it turns out that the criteria to have to gain trust in an engineering team are not exactly the same for, I would caricature by saying male and woman, but I will also say that there are many different kind of like engineers. And so I think it's very important to be able to adapt the style and the motivation really and tailor it really to the personality you have in your teams and the type of profiles. And each team is different. I can tell you that even if you work on the same field or application, you would have very different strategies to maintain performance depending on the team members. So it's really about understanding the dynamic between the team members.
Thank you so much. I love that, understanding the dynamics. And I'm going to come back to you, Claire, because especially when you're working with engineers, a lot of engineers are very skilled at what they do. So how do you actually, you can give us an example of how you actually work with these different skill sets, working with the different human beings, I would say, to actually bring that dynamics to work. Do you have an example where it was really difficult, and what did you do to actually make it work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So when a classical example would be that it's very easy for skilled engineers who worked alone for extensive period of time, especially the self-taught engineer who really are super skilled at like creating algorithm. It's often very hard to change, like when the team is growing, to change the trend and have them discussing the ideas before going to implementation. And the reason you need to do that for when you have a bigger team is just because the interfaces of someone's work with the overall system is almost more important for the impact of the team than one specific individual contribution. And you really have to be able to get this communication going, even if let's say this person who is really skilled is a top contributor. So you have to find the balance between really harmonizing this top performer and have a way to have this person communicating with the rest of the team without getting impatient or without having to spend too much time explaining things. And so for that, it turns that design document and really going through this exercise of design document helps a lot, because suddenly the conversation become asynchronous. So you do not have to like solve problems or like, design decision just in one meeting, but you really have a document. Some people can spend more time on the document, reviewing the document and making sure they understand, ask between themselves, and iterate on different approaches and all of that. And a top contributor can still be able to drop, I would say, the main ideas. And that's an efficient way to start the conversation and make sure the information, at least, is shared and understood by the whole group. And then after that, you can reconvey, for instance, the group to discuss the detail and implementation detail and finalize the design document together. So it's a little bit minimizing the initial friction you could have, maximize the knowledge and the repartition of knowledge in the team, and only bring back everyone together when it's time to like separate the work or distribute the work items. That's one example, would be one example.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. You really touched on quite a few points there that I like. And the whole idea of design document, I think, is a fantastic way of really working. So thank you very much for that, Claire. Thank you. And Douglas, the same question. Do you have an example of where you've had to, or even experienced where you had to really work with, because we're working with engineers here who are really skilled in different aspects, to actually get them to be more effective or even working together collaboratively? Do you have any experience with that? Thank you.
Yes, first of all, I want to say I completely agree with everything that Claire has just said. So I'll try and answer this in a way that layers onto that and that speaks to the communication piece in particular. It's communication and stakeholder management and making sure that peers are informed is a skill in and of itself. And it's not a skill that most engineers have spent their lives training for, in the same way that we have training to program, to build systems. And so getting people to understand that it is a skill, that it is impactful, and that it needs conscious practice is the sort of first hurdle to get over. And the sort of second one that I find in that dimension is that for the engineer who is writing or presenting the design document, they're probably significantly more invested in especially in the details, but also in the outcome and the delivery associated with that design document than most of the audience. And so building up skills with those engineers of, yes, you have to have a communication plan and it needs to be multifaceted so that you're delivering the same message over and over again in a consistent way, that you are actively engaging with people in order to draw them in. I find a reasonably common pattern with engineers, myself included, has been, well, I have sent an email that says a design document exists. That means everybody knows what is happening now, and it's just not true. So one of the core areas that I focus, especially with my sort of senior and principal engineers, is on communication, stakeholder management, and crafting a message that lands well.
Oh wow! Thank you very much. That's really interesting. So I just wanted to ask, and I'll direct this to Claire. Actually, what are the main challenges that you find, especially with engineering teams, to get them to be really impactful in what they do? Or I would say challenges that you tend to find to get a team to really work together and achieve the results, be very, very productive in what they do.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think there's many different facets to the problem, and so and sometimes I actually don't believe that when you pass the number of 10 people, it's unclear to me if there is any value anymore to have a many-to-many communication channels, where everyone speak about everything in every context. And so my finding is that I think not only everyone is expert on all the topics, but in addition, not everyone gets along or like have this kind of like deep trust with everyone in the team. So often it's helpful to create clusters of skill set and people who work well together. And there is no magic recipe. I mean, I don't have one. Maybe Douglas, who really studied the field formally, and I didn't, would be able to give more information there. But fundamentally, it's really about, again, observing the dynamic between people and really be detail-oriented and really try to understand the intent and the fear of each employee, the skills and their and also their dreams, so that you can align people who work similarly. You can align them in sub-projects or sub-tasks that they can perform together. But because ultimately it's just very hard to work alone anyway. But minimizing the noise is very important. And it's always done by like doing exactly that, this detailed analysis of the personalities and the skill set, and match them into sub-projects so that you minimize the noise. And like, not everyone has to understand everything about the project. And finding this exact balance is very important, because this is how people can focus on what is actually impactful for them, for their subgroup, instead of mixing all the information and expect that everyone would get at the same level.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's fantastic. So Douglas, yeah, same question actually. What are the main challenges that you've come across, and how did you elevate them?
Yes, unfortunately, I do not have a magic formula. I'm very sorry, Claire, but I would share if I did. I would say, once again, I agree with everything that Claire has said. One particular challenge that I have found in trying to tailor projects and individuals is making sure that incentives are aligned. And I don't just mean in terms of making sure that the success criteria for a project are very clear to everyone, and especially in cross-discipline situations where you have data science or product managers or whatever involved in the loop, but also at a sort of company and career development level. And so if your performance review isn't tied to the success criteria of your project, and the feedback that you're getting from your manager is not aligned with the success criteria of the project and your career development, your promotion process, your performance process, then people will be confused as to what they need to do to be successful. They will feel that their success is based on randomness, or whether their manager likes them, or nefarious dark politics that are happening in the background, and they'll spend their time trying to work out what that is instead of being able to, sort of do their core job. So for me, a really key thing there is the alignment of incentives across company, career, and project.
Yeah, I like that. It's that clarity, isn't it? And so that everyone knows what's actually happening, and also knowing what the objectives are, so that they know what they're being judged. I like that. I'm quite curious now, because what role do leaders actually play in being able to get teams to be very productive or high perform, a team high performance, especially when you're working with teams that have, multiple skilled teams, which is what you tend to find a lot in engineering. So what's the role of leaders in this time, and how can leaders be more effective in being able to do this properly? And I'll direct this to Douglas again this time.
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer this with the lens of the incentives piece. So one of the things that I do for my team is that I publish the rubrics that we use for promotion decisions and for performance reviews and so forth. And I try and have regular conversations with people about them. And within those rubrics, we'll have included things like the definition of success for a project. And the reason for this is so that we don't get into I can defend my performance by saying, well, I did my thing. It doesn't matter that the project wasn't successful. I did my bit. It was somebody else's fault, because the rubric says that I don't care about that. I care about whether the project was successful or not, and how you contributed to the project being successful. And I found that by having those rubrics out in the open, those conversations are a lot more crisp, a lot more directed, and we get a lot better feedback about getting value out of things like performance review processes and promotion decisions and so forth. So highly recommend doing that if you have rubrics for these things, making them public and having open, regular discussions about them, and putting concerted effort into making sure that they are aligned with definitions of project success.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, so of course I fully agree with Douglas, and I would like maybe to add maybe another aspect that would be so for me, what is very what turned out to be very efficient is also always making sure that the purpose of the work is very well understood. And when I say the purpose, is not the individual purpose, but this is the purpose of the project for the company or even the impact in the world. So sometimes it can be tricky to paint the vision, but I found that the moment you manage to align people on something that is bigger even than the team, well, it makes it much easier for people to start trusting each other, because the success criteria is bigger than the individual team contribution, and so it helps a lot bringing this clarity of purpose. The other thing that a manager can do and help a lot is actually hiring the right people, and again, be technical enough to understand who is really contributing or not. Because often a lot of frustration comes in these groups when someone who is very discreet and contributes a lot is not recognized as much as someone who is contributing much less. And if at the managerial level you are not able to decipher that, the problem is that it's going to reinforce less skilled people to take more of the place, and it's going to diminish again the ability for maybe more skilled people and discrete people to not shine, but not being recognized. And that, I think, in the end, no matter how much we try to help team to grow, if the team has not the talent or not the skill set in the first place, this is mission impossible, or it's very hard to overcome the challenges. And it's especially true in robotics, where there is so much technical fields that have to be extremely well understood for the overall system to work together. And I think
right. Yeah, interesting. I think because you touched on a great point, which is hiring the right people. And I kind of want us to dig a bit deeper into that in terms, because what is actually, or how can it be done? How do you make sure that you're hiring the right people? Because you've talked about it in terms of skills, and you talked about it in terms of team fit to an extent. How do leaders or managers or how do they make sure that they're hiring the right people, and what should they be looking for when they're hiring people to make sure that the people they're hiring actually come in to bring benefits to the team and not drag the team down? So I'm going to ping this to Douglas this time.
Well, it's a huge topic. I'll try and touch on one or two things that I think are particularly important. So at Skyscanner, we do 2 lots of cultural interviews, which is more than we do technical interviews. Cultural interviews are always sort of a minefield, because you don't want them to be sort of insular and reinforcing sort of existing things, rather than having people bringing something new. But things that we particularly focus on there are times when you had a disagreement at work and how you resolved that, or a time where you worked on a project that was behind and how you communicated about that and how you resolved that. And in particular for us as well, times where you got feedback and where you were able to action that feedback in some sort of meaningful way. Those I find are the sort of most illuminating questions. I know they don't speak to technical skill a lot, but I find them to be very predictive of that, because someone who is open and able to have a growth mindset and to be able to ingest feedback and act upon it is likely to have built up the technical skill set also, because they'll have had the sort of openness to it and the vulnerability to know that they don't know things and therefore go out and drive them. So I'm a big fan of those type of interview styles.
Oh yeah, you've touched on my heartthrob, which is that growth mindset and emotional intelligence. It's so important, and I love that. So Claire, yes, you jump in because we're almost at the end now. What great tip would you give to manage our leaders in terms of hiring to make sure that they've got the right people?
Yes, so I mean, it always starts also a little bit the same I was describing, which is breaking down the overall project into manageable pieces for each of the manager, and clarifies the boundaries of the project for each team. And that's very important, because that's going to be the guideline for the manager in line to be able to hire particular skill set. And the other advice is always to look at the skill set you have right now. Look at your team and understand what is working and not working in the team. And hiring is an incremental process. I am actually not a big, I would say, if I can give one advice, is that even if you got VC money and a lot of VC money to hire and to scale up the company, scaling up just to get numbers and accumulating people is never working in the long run. So hiring needs to take time, and it's okay if it takes time. It might be less exciting to show the growth of the company, but by doing this thing incrementally and really observing the dynamic, you have a much better chance to actually have an effective team where the team members' personalities are working well together. And I think it's, again, very important, because each individual is unique, and so that's how in the end you have to grow your team, being detail oriented and really understand who is working in your team and how they're working together. So take your time to hire.
Thank you so much, Claire and Douglas. You've been absolutely amazing. And, there are a lot of points that you've really given here to take away. And I love the way Claire kind of wrapped it up. It's every single person is unique. And it's really being able to deal with people as individuals, as human beings, because you get the best out of them that way. We touched on so much. We started off by looking at trust, accountability, team dynamics kept coming through quite a lot, how important that is. And I loved how, Douglas, you touched on the incentives being aligned, just that clarity. Really, I think, Claire, you talked about the purpose being understood. It just keeps coming back to, it's just once people know what they need to do, what they're being judged on, what they're being measured against, it just makes such a difference. So I really do value, so much of what you guys have said. Thank you so much. And I think we're almost at the end now. So I'm just going to give you just, I think 30 seconds to just give one last piece of advice or nugget or word of wisdom, anything you really want for us to round this up. So Douglas, you start, please.
30 seconds. I think I'm going to reiterate Claire's point in hiring. The wrong person is worse than no person. Hire slow.
Oh, thank you. And Claire?
And there is one question, maybe?
Yes, I've got a question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, go for that question. Awesome.
Yeah. So Nvidia is a very is a matrix organization. So the funny part at Nvidia is that a lot of people you're gonna work with in your project are not reporting to you. So they're really external teams, and so it creates this kind of dynamic where, I mean, you don't really have any levers to incentivize directly, like you would have as a manager, but to incentivize other teams. But the same philosophy applies, which is, if you understand the dynamic, if you understand how this team is working, you can find that lever to maximize the communication between teams. And so by still having this matrix organization, one of the benefits is that you actually can leverage the same team for multiple other teams across the company, instead of having to duplicate that same team into individual reporting structure. And that does reduce silo a lot, because you have to work with others. Yeah, that would be the I hope it answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic answer, because it's just that whole act of being able to collaborate effectively, and just be adaptable to the working with different teams. So thank you, fantastic answer, and a great way to wrap this up. So I'm going to say thank you once again to Claire and Douglas. You've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to hand this over to Esme to round this session up now for us.